So in today's video, we're going to be talking about probably the most famous aquarium plant, and that is Madagascar lace. So what's going on, guys? Justin from H2OPlants.com here today, and we are talking about the Madagascar lace plant. Now, I have to say this is probably one of my most favorite aquatic plants ever since I started keeping aquarium plants. This was probably the one that piqued my interest the most early on, and ever since then it's just been an all-around favorite of mine. Now, Madagascar lace are a bulb-like plant. They actually get massive. You can see here, these leaves are probably about a foot long, and this is just a small baby plant. I also have another one here. This one's a bit more of a baby. This one we've only had in for a couple, I would say, days, maybe a week or so. And you can see here, it's very tiny as opposed to this where we've had for a couple weeks now, and it's gotten rather large. Now, I have seen these guys in a tank that was probably, if I had to guess, maybe about 3 to 4 foot tall, and the leaves reach the top. These plants get incredibly long leaves, so I can't stress that enough. If you want to keep this guy, have a plan for it to be rather large, or you're just going to have to keep trimming it as it gets bigger and bigger leaves, because that will happen. Now, I did say Madagascar lace was probably the most famous plant in the world. And I say that because if you go back to World War II and see what happened with this plant, it was nearly harvested to extinction. However, because we were able to propagate it and reintroduce it back into the wild, it has bounced back significantly, although it is still rather a rare plant, so it is, somewhat hard to get your hands on these every once in a while. They are seasonal for the most part when it comes to the aquarium industry, so you usually have them for maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 seasons, and then during one season you won't have them. And it's typically actually during the summer. Summer is a hard time to get these guys because that's their dormancy period. They like to go dormant when it gets hot out, and these are cold water plants, so keep that in mind. Anywhere between low 60s to low 70s, I would say like 75. Anything above 75 is going to be pushing it, and you may experience it going to dormancy faster in that case, because when the water is warm, it tends to want to just let out its bloom, go dormant, because it's not used to that warm weather. It likes to be cool. So keep that in mind when you have this guy if you have it in a warm water tank. Now, one thing I actually learned while researching for this video is that warm season, I was always under the impression that bulb plants you were supposed to take out of the water and rest in like a cool bag of sand. If you go back to one of my Pongeton videos, I discussed that, because most of the Pongetons, that's the case with them. You're supposed to take them out of the water, the bulb, and you're supposed to plant that in like a bag of wet, damp sand and store it in a cool place for about 2 to 3 months and then reintroduce it into your aquarium. However, this one you're not supposed to do that with, according to some of the articles I found. You're supposed to leave this be and just kind of let it do its thing. It will eventually come back, but it typically does that during the summer because it's its dormancy period. So when the temperature heats up outside and maybe your house is a little bit warmer than normal, don't be afraid when these things start to die back. You'll see its leaves start to die back. You also see it like happen right after it blooms, because blooming is typically a sign of it going into dormancy. And right now there is a little tiny flower pod here that still, it has a long way to go. It has to grow to reach the surface of the water, so it's rather small. But yeah, that's typically when it goes dormant, you would see that. Now, for obvious reasons, it's called the lace plant, and that's because its leaves are see-through. You can see here, it actually has not a solid leaf structure, it has holes. The reason why is because they are found in fast water streams, so the water is able to flow and the leaves can still sit upright, because when the water flows through these leaves, it goes through all the holes and it allows the leaf to stand, still upright, reaching for the sun and all that. So it works out pretty good. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're going to put this in your aquarium. It does like lots of flow, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you have a tank with lots of flow. It really does enjoy that. It's actually really beneficial, and it can be a bad thing if you don't have enough flow for this guy, because what will happen is it'll grow all sorts of algae if it doesn't have enough flow. And because of its big, broad leaves, this guy is rather tough for most fish to deal with. So if you have like cichlids or whatnot, or goldfish, this is an easy plant to stick in there. And really, honestly, all you gotta do is get like a little pot of substrate and plant this guy in there if you have rough fish, or just plant it in your substrate and it should do fine. Now, while we're on the topic of substrate, let's talk about it. This guy is a heavy root feeding plant. It has a bulb. Like I said, the bulb is where it stores its nutrients, but it does have a really good root structure. This one, I just so happened, it was floating in the aquarium. It wasn't rooted yet, so it was easy for me to pluck out. I was trying to get another one, and that thing was so rooted in there, I just kind of left it be. I didn't want to disturb it, but because this one was free floating, I was able to just rip it up, no problem. Now, good quality substrate. If you don't have good quality substrate, get yourself some root tabs. We actually sell root tabs on our shop, Vital Tabs. You can pick these up. You can put one right around the base, and that'll be good for anywhere between like 2 to 4 months with this guy. It does use a lot of nutrients, so just be prepared. It will gobble up everything in the substrate that it can. It doesn't need deep substrate though. It just needs a thin layer, something to put its roots in. It doesn't have a deep root system, but it does have a intricate root system, meaning it will really root out, send out tons of roots and really grab hold. As far as trimming this guy, like most other bulb plants, if you ever want to trim a leaf, you're going to want to trim it all the way back down to where the bulb is. So as far back as you can, you would want to take off a leaf down here. You never want to cut across. You damage the leaf. If it ever gets out of control and it's growing really big for you, start chopping off the bigger growing leaves, and that'll kind of train the plant to stay smaller. But don't just chop it across, across the leaf. Chop it down at the bottom. Now, a lot of people will think that this plant needs high light or a lot of light. It's actually a really low light plant. It enjoys low light. A matter of fact, giving it high light may encourage it to actually go to its dormancy faster because it's going to think it's summer. It's going to think it's sunnier. It's getting more light. Therefore, it's going to trigger that kind of natural response. You can actually see here, this plant is getting a ton of light because it's actually almost like it's a bronze color, like a brown-red color. But typically, the leaves are supposed to be green like this. They're green or this kind of green, right? This is much greener than this. However, this, because it was floating, like I said, the leaves were right at the surface getting all the light. So they're actually turning a reddish brown. So that's a good indication that this guy's getting a little too much light, so I'm probably going to make sure it's further down in the aquarium so, it doesn't get that triggered by it. Now, as far as propagation, I've heard many different methods. I've heard you could cut the bulb in half. I don't know if I would go that far. I'd probably just leave it be. If you wanted to try and propagate it, wait till it flowers, right? This little flower. Wait till it comes up out of the surface of the water. It'll flower there. And then take like a paintbrush and kind of dust the pollen between the leaves and the stay, like the, not the leaves, but the flowers, between the stay and the other part of the flower, and kind of spread the pollen around, see if that produces anything. It may eventually like produce little tiny bulbs on it. I've never seen it done, but it's worth a shot if you really want to give it a try to propagate these things. But really, when it comes to Madagascar leaves, this is one of those that you only need one, really. I mean, getting any more than one is probably a bit ridiculous, but if you want more than one, that's fine. But what I would say is this is like your kind of major showpiece plant. You throw this in your aquarium, and that's the showstopper. People are going to walk in and be like, why does that plant have holes in its leaves? And then you could explain to them, well, it's in a high flowing environment typically, and that allows the leaves to stand upright, so it's really cool. When I first saw this plant, I thought it was fake, honestly. When I first got into the aquarium hobby, I saw this, I'm like, that's not real. There's no way a plant would have holes in its leaves. But it does, and it's really, really cool. I can't stress this enough, how cool this plant really is. But I think we covered everything with the Madagascar lace. Let me know what you think of this plant. If you have one, let me know down in the comments below. Do you enjoy it? If you are thinking about getting it, maybe now, let me know if you are thinking about getting it. Of course, if you want to pick some up, you could go on our website, h2oplants.com, and you will most likely get something, similar to this or this, either one. This is only a couple weeks old compared to that one, so whatever the case is, but check out our website to pick yourself up some. As always, if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos, much like this one. If you enjoyed this video and you want to check out other ones, you can click either one of those, and I will see you guys next time.